Hello, my name is Wendy Barden, and I serve as Music Education Specialist in Professional Development and Resource Programs at Purpose Center for Arts Education. I'm here to support the work of music educators across Minnesota in any way that I can. Please don't hesitate to send an email if you have a question or if there's another way you think I might be able to help. Over the next 30 minutes or so, I will introduce you to lesson and resource ideas available for teaching music of Minnesota American Indian tribes and communities. The resources I'll be highlighting can be accessed on the Purpose Center website, Music Education Specialist page. Outcomes of this session: you will become very aware of Anchor Standard Number 10 from the new K-12 Minnesota Standards and Benchmarks in Music. You will take away basic information about music of Minnesota American Indian tribes and communities. You'll gain a brief introduction to 14 lessons that are posted on the Music Education Specialist webpage, and be reminded of, or introduced to, assessment formats and feedback tools that you could use in conjunction with these lessons or other responding and connecting lessons. As we begin, we take a moment to recognize and acknowledge that the land we are standing on across Minnesota-Makoche is the homeland of the Dakota and Ojibwe people. We further acknowledge that the state of Minnesota encompasses 11 tribes and communities of the Dakota and Ojibwe people, who are the original caretakers of the land and are still here and thriving. Even in a virtual workshop, it is critically important to acknowledge and honor this Indigenous history and ongoing presence. We must acknowledge the colonization that took place in this state and that it is an unresolved condition of our country's founding and continued existence. We must acknowledge that the internet and technology that makes this presentation possible can be a colonizing mechanism and that it is not equally available to all peoples. We ask everyone gathered here to think of this statement not as an end in itself, but as motivation to deepen our commitment to understanding the aesthetic, cultural, and political history of Native peoples and Native land. All of the lessons and resources in this presentation support student learning in Anchor Standard Number 10 of the 2018 Arts Standards, which reads, "Demonstrate an understanding that artistic works influence and are influenced by personal, societal, cultural, and historical contexts, including the contributions of Minnesota American Indian tribes and communities." As much as we want our students to be music makers, now is not the time. Approach music of Minnesota American Indian tribes and communities from the connect and respond processes using verbs like listen, identify, describe, and explain. The first document to check out is the table of contents. All of the lessons and resources are listed, along with suggested grade levels, whether or not internet is required, and an I can statement. Notice the column of colored boxes there. It's filled with mostly orange, which means connect, and some respond, red, and very few purple, which is perform. So let's begin with brief background information. Anishinaabe and Dakota Indians live in Minnesota. There are 11 communities, each with its own culture. When you are planning lessons, seek out a culture bearer or elder in your community to help you know what is acceptable for your classroom in your area. You might make initial inquiries with the Indian education specialist in your district or the equity department. Liz Jocala is a music educator and enrolled Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior tribal member. She has been key in helping music educators across the state learn about music of Minnesota American Indian tribes and communities for almost the last 15 years. Liz shared information on the next few slides at MMEA Midwinter Clinic in 2020. Let's think about these ideas. In American Indian culture, the act of making sound is sacred. Singing and dancing is often prayerful and can be involved in healing. Musical instruments have spirit. These ideas contribute, at least in part, to making it really challenging for non-Native people to teach music of Minnesota American Indian tribes and communities in our music classrooms. Given that, how do we know what music is okay for the classroom? Liz suggests starting with contemporary recordings. Anything posted on YouTube and other streaming services should be okay. Traditional music of Anishinaabe and Dakota people has drums and shakers or wooden flutes. Most melodies are monophonic, and a vocal line is not always sung in the same meter or tempo as accompanying percussion. More recently composed music may be based on popular music genres and sound less traditional. So, what is real or authentic Indigenous music? To address the intent of Anchor Standard Number 10, students need to respond and connect with music that's composed or created by Indigenous people. About half the lesson resources I'll show you are based on traditional sounding music, and the other half feature music created in contemporary genres. Make note that lesson resources are shared with you as worksheets. And I know that's not necessarily the best way to share information or experiences with your students. So feel free to use resources as is, or cut them up, use sections, create interactive activities, whatever fits your learning situation and your students best. It's good to establish a basic understanding of the elements and traditions of Anishinaabe and Dakota music, and this document here, labeled Traditional Music, helps provide some of that information. Whether your students are listening to music that is more traditional or contemporary, they need some basis for discussion and comparison. This document will help with that, or give you some ideas towards that end. Let's look at examples of traditional music first. That's indicated by that T in the blue oval up in the upper left-hand corner. If you remember, Anchor Standard Number 10 is the overarching statement we're working on. Then at the benchmark level, music of Minnesota American Indian tribes and communities is called out specifically in grades 1 and 6. Don't be fooled by part of the benchmark language that is crossed out here. Yes, it works well to sing and play instruments with music from various cultures, but again, unless you have help from an elder in your community, now is the time to stay with the responding and connecting processes of music of American Indian tribes and communities. This Flutes Around the World lesson might be a good way to introduce young students to several flutes, including the indigenous flute that's played here by Kevin Locke. I especially like the discussion questions at the top of the page, as well as the questions involving student preference at the bottom. This is the first of 3 lessons about the jingle dress, and one that is geared more towards elementary students. You have the printed story of the jingle dress, and a dramatization of that story is presented in the video excerpt produced by Twin Cities Public Television. It's interesting to me that the jingle dress appears in tribes and communities across North America, but seems to connect back to the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. Students also view and describe 4 aspects of jingle dance music at a Hinckley, Minnesota powwow. This second lesson about the jingle dress also begins with a story about the dress. With a few more details added, I find it fascinating that the jingle dress and its connection to healing dates back about 100 years. To the last global pandemic. Check out the tic-tac-toe listening board on the second page. This framework can be used in a variety of ways. One way might be for students to form groups of 3, select a row across, up and down, or diagonal, and then each student listens for the element in their one box. Discuss and share what they've heard, and then move on to another row. The 16-minute video about the jingle dress in context of today is narrated by Brenda Child. She's an Ojibwe historian and professor of American Studies at the University of Minnesota. This final lesson about the jingle dress is for older students. There's more reading, and at this level, I would recommend watching the entire documentary from Twin Cities Public Television. The listening activity on the second page involves comparing and contrasting the music and styles of 2 jingle dances. Storybooks are always welcome resources in the classroom. So here are 2 books about or including jingle dancing, Jingle Dancer, and Bow Wow Powwow. These books are available for checkout from the Perpich Library. For more information, you can go to our website, perpich.mn.gov. There are 2 lessons that highlight the context of Nibi song. This song was created by Doreen Day, as you'll read, and she's given permission for it to be sung in classrooms. The statement in the box serves to acknowledge Doreen Day as the creator of the song, much like a copyright would. Share the story of Nibi's song and then teach your students to sing it. There's no notation, so you'll need to learn it from the recording, which is sung by Doreen. After students have learned Nibi's song, read We Are Water Protectors and relate the story and song. Singing songs is one way to honor something we respect. The second lesson that includes Nibi's song is for older students. The lesson begins with an introduction to the water walk around Lake Superior and its purpose of both raising awareness of pollution levels and keeping waters fresh. If you were to use the water walk as a small unit, notice the teaching strategy in Part 2. Instructions have students choosing 3 of the 5 questions to answer, using details, of course. A final thought, music can be a part of expressing what's really important to us. Are there other songs or pieces you are studying that the composer's intent is to express something of importance? Make that connection. New Day's song is performed by the Oshkee Jishik singers from Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior. This is maybe more of a traditional listen to and describe experience. The lesson suggests students listen to this song 5 times, each time focusing on one of the elements: the use of syllables, its basic form, the melodic contour, use of beat, and timbre. The lesson concludes with students writing about an individual or a group that uses music to express who they are and what they value. This completes the lessons based on more traditional sounding music. The rest of the lessons use music that is more heavily influenced by contemporary American popular music. So that's indicated by the C in the yellow oval up in the upper left-hand corner. Fry bread is a tradition in most American Indian tribes and communities across the U.S., but it was first made out of desperate necessity. Read the short history that's provided, or better yet, read this beautiful picture book, Fry Bread. Then meet singer-songwriter Keith Secola from Cook, Minnesota, performing his song, Fry Bread. Is there a special food or tradition in your heritage? Meet 2-for-1. Yes, literally 2-for-1. He's a hip-hop artist from Minneapolis, and his name refers to his Dakota and Puerto Rican ancestry. His music often has themes of social awareness, but it can also be fun and kind of catchy, too. The lyrics of Sage Patch Kid are included. With rap especially, I encourage you to review the lyrics before you bring them into class. Probably an obvious statement, right? 2-for-1 has two very different performances of Sage Patch Kid. View and compare them. One's a music video, and the other's a studio performance. Paul LaRush grew up in Worthington, Minnesota. He was adopted at birth, and it wasn't until he was an adult that he learned he was a member of the Lower Brule Sioux tribe of South Dakota. This lesson includes a 15-minute documentary about Paul's life. He's a singer and songwriter and producer, and the founder of the band Brule. When students know some of the characteristics of traditional Dakota music, they'll most likely notice connections to the quality of the flute and the use of drums in his song, Star People. Here's another Minneapolis hip-hop artist, Tall Paul. Paul is an enrolled member of the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe in northern Minnesota, but he grew up in the urban environment. Students can learn more about him from a feature by PBS Wisconsin and an interview with Digital Drum. Prayers in a Song is his featured music. Before viewing the music video, read the lyrics. Once again, notice that the chorus, though, is translated into the Anishinaabe language. The lesson concludes with students making connections to their own roots. This next lesson features Ruins by Leah Lem. Leah is a member of the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe, and she lives in Grand Rapids. Use the link that's included there to hear Leah talk about her own piece. Ruins is performed by the group Molecular Machine. Leah sings lead vocals and plays keyboards. This entire piece is about 32 minutes in length, but for purposes of this lesson, students are describing elements from just a couple of sections. Students finish by thinking about one thing from their culture or experiences that they would incorporate into a composition. Pretendians is a native rock band based in Minneapolis. Their day jobs? A teacher, 2 computer specialists, and a semi-employed hipster, self-described. Their song, The 38, is about the hanging of 38 Dakota men in Mankato on December 26, 1862. In this lesson, learn personal accounts of the U.S.-Dakota War of 1862 using links to the Minnesota Historical Society. Then have your students consider how that story has been retold through this popular rock music. This might be a good lesson to team teach with the American history teacher. This final lesson focuses on the Native American boarding schools and another song by Keith Secola, Say Your Name. The lesson brings together an article from the Minnesota Historical Society, artwork by Minnesota artist Laura Youngbird, and then Keith's music. Think through this lesson before you present it, because it's based on really sensitive material, and especially for students who may have suffered trauma themselves. Again, this might be a good lesson to team teach with your American history teacher. The last resource offers ideas for assessing and giving feedback on student work in the responding and connecting processes. They work equally well whether questions are based on music of Minnesota American Indian tribes and communities or something else. At the top of the page, notice that students might respond verbally, in writing, or by drawing or using images. To the questions or prompts on the featured lessons we've been looking at, there's rarely just one correct answer. So sometimes it might be most appropriate to mark responses simply as reasonable or satisfactory, or not yet. Other times, using a checklist is the way to go. In this example, students need to state their opinion, give evidence to back it up, and then add a little bit more detail. I'm a fan of the checklist because students can easily use it to assess their own response. And then finally, there's the rubric, which definitely requires the most reading to decipher and probably the most thinking on the teacher's part. Sometimes a rubric can give students the most detailed information, but not always. The bottom line, I encourage you to do more than giving students credit for just turning in their completed papers. So, what are the session takeaways, perhaps? First, we've been talking about this anchor standard number 10, which is part of the Connect strand of the 2018 Minnesota Arts Standards. Second, as much as we want our students to be music makers, when we're studying music of Minnesota American Indian tribes and communities, it's most appropriate to do that through the connect and respond processes, not performing. Third, you've been introduced to 14 lessons that are posted on the Perpich website. They've been shared with you in a worksheet format, and you are most welcome to use them as is or break them apart, cut them apart, use just sections of them. Use them in ways that best fit your students and your teaching situation. Check back regularly as more lesson resources will be added. If you have any questions on these lessons or the standards and benchmarks, please don't hesitate to email. I am always ready and happy to think aloud with you. Thanks much for your time and participation.